Welcome to Grab Your Gear. I am Joe. It is a cloudy, overcast fall day where I am at in Ohio. Fall is upon us, so get ready because it's just going to get colder, and that's actually what happens. That's called climate change. Welcoming in the man who joins me every week nowadays, Jack Windsor. Jack, of course, the founder and editor-in-chief of the Ohio Press Network. Also host the Windsor Report, which can be heard on 98.9 FM in Columbus, Ohio. You can also stream Jack's show as well on all your major podcast platforms. I believe that is correct. Welcome, Jack. How are you today?
Joe, I'm super fantastic. Thanks for choosing me today. Great to be back with you.
Well, I choose you every week, so I guess now you're the co-host.
I love it.
So embrace it. Embrace it, my friend. It's going to be hard not to talk about politics. It's November. The election's 3 weeks away, 3 weeks from today, I believe. And we're in Ohio, which used to be a battleground state. There are some things that are going to be issues here. A lot's going on. I took a step back last night, decided to I wanted to observe how I thought things were going and see if I could pick up things. So I made a list of 5 things that I've noticed, and I want you, as a astute political observer, tell me what the hell is going on. Okay, that's what we're going to do today. At least that's where we're going to start. And then I have some other questions for you.
Okay.
But so I noticed this stuck out to me more than anything because I have gone pheasant hunting and I have shot rifles. I own shotguns. I have a handgun. Gone to range. Went through concealed carry. Okay, so this struck me when I saw Tim Waltz go pheasant hunting with a group of influencers. And I just noticed the way he handled his weapon, and I thought about Michael Dukakis in a tank. And like, there's always this one moment that visually blows up, and I thought of Dukakis, but I'm not sure it does for him. But I noticed that seems to be more anger building around the Harris Waltz campaign. And when I say anger, they went from joy to they were trying to do the hope and optimism thing, I think, for a while, but now it's just outright fascism. People are going to be arrested. They're going to be picked up by the National Guard. There's that. 3, the warning of civil unrest. We talked about that, I believe, last week, but that creeps up again. And I also saw a Reuters poll where actually 2/3 of Americans believe there will be some sort of violence after the election. We've had 2.5 assassination kind of attempts. We had the one, of course, in Pennsylvania where it actually somebody shot the president. We had the other one in Florida where the perp was apprehended, and a homeless guy who travels the world. We'll talk about that another time. And then this man at Coachella, California, who was picked up just outside of a Trump rally with a firearm in his car. And the last thing that I thought was shocking, I'd never see, was VP Harris agreeing to sit down on Fox News with Bret Baier and do an interview on Wednesday at 6 p.m. What's going on?
Well, I'll handle the last one first and then the first one. The last one first. Desperate times call for desperate measures. And I think Kamala Harris has stalled and tried to stymie voters long enough that she recognizes her campaign is collapsing. So you've got to do something.
Is it really?
Yes, it is. I believe that it is. And when I say collapsing, recognizing that there's a firm foundation that someone once said, Trump could do something so egregious and his voters would vote for him. I believe that there is an equal measure of people on the opposite side. Kamala Harris could do whatever, and they would be all in because they suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. So there is this segment of people who are looking at this that still have a certain amount of fair-mindedness about them, and they are curious. Polls have shown us that they are curious about where Kamala Harris stands on issues that are important to them, the economy, immigration, and other such things. And opportunity economy only goes so far. Saying that on day one, you're going to handle the border when you have been in charge of the border for 4 years only goes so far. And so I think they're trying to stop the hemorrhaging. But if Bret Baier does his job and Fox News does its job. And by the way, I'm not a big Fox News fan. I think they are what I would call controlled opposition. They give the appearance of being center to right, but they drink from the same poison well as the other broadcast networks. But I think she has to do it. But let's talk about this Tim Walz thing. There are three things with respect to Tim Walz that I think are interesting. First, Joe, how much do you want to bet that brush suit that he was wearing was brand spanking new?
It was. I could tell.
Just
There was
off
no
the
wrinkle.
rack.
I
No
mean, if you
wrinkle.
go hunting and you wear those, which you have to wear when you go, especially if you go to farms, obviously that's where you go pheasant hunting, where they actually load and stock them. It always rains. It's always muddy. You wad them up, and when you pull it back out, it never looks like that unless you just bought it at Cabela's.
That's right. So there's number one. You look at it and go, okay. And then secondly, this guy's carrying a Beretta A400 shotgun. Now, this is where I have to step back and admit, so that I don't sound and look like Harry Walz, Kamala Harris, Tim Walz. I'm not a hunter. Okay. So I need to make that very clear. But I've looked in gun shops, and it appears to me that you can get a solid 12 gauge shotgun for $200 to $600. But here comes Tim Walz with an A400, and just a quick internet search will help you understand that's about $1,700, maybe $3,000, depending on which one you pick. This is the everyman persona that he's trying to vibe. I think so. He's 0 for 2. And then finally, here's a pro tip, since he loves to give pro tips. If you're going to take a gun for a photo op, spend ample time loading your rifle, spend ample time shooting your rifle. Joe, he couldn't get the cartridges in the chamber, and he stood there fiddling with the gun for what must have felt like to him an eternity. And I don't know what's more uncomfortable, seeing him with the gun or the jazz hands.
Well, he had he placed it in his crotch too, which Tinfoil Ted does a little bit more hunting than I do, but I'm almost positive you got to be a very advanced hunter before you load your weapon by embracing the stock up against your crotch. The other thing is, when you go pheasant hunting, and again, I'll defer to Tinfoil Ted on this, you normally use a 12 gauge shotgun. That's a double barrel or a single barrel shotgun. I mean, unless there's another form of weapon you use, that's the most common, I think, that is used in pheasant hunting. But it looked weird. It looked odd. And then I saw some other video. And again, I'm not just picking on them. I'm telling you what I watched. They did the circle around, half circle guys on fold out chairs sitting there after the hunt. And I thought, what'd they shoot? I mean,
the breeze.
Well, when you shoot a pheasant, a dog gets it, brings it back to you, and normally you lay them out and you take a picture with people behind the pheasants. I think I didn't see that, and then I thought, would his supporters want to see him with a bloody bird? It was just so odd.
It's so fake. Everything that I've seen from this campaign, and I'm talking about, it's two-sided, right? So they have these rallies, and they're so optimistic about the crowd size, and then you go, well, wait a minute. It was a concert, and then they kind of took the stage after. Some people think that there's AI. But then you go to the opposite, and then they also have these people out on social media, which, by the way, we know now that they pay, and they pay well, who are posting videos of Trump rallies. But it's interesting. They'll pan a camera behind the stage and go, look at all these open seats. Meanwhile, there are 20 or 30,000 people out in front, or they'll capture an audience before the event even starts. It's just a lot of smoke and mirrors. It's a lot of deception. Okay. And I just don't think, back to what I said earlier, I think the campaign is collapsing because I think Americans are smart, and I think people are sick and tired. We act to avoid pain and pursue pleasure. Right now, we're feeling the heat of high gas prices, high healthcare prices, high grocery prices, and you don't have to look very far. In Ohio, you can look at Springfield, Lima, other places, and go, we have an open border, and that's creating significant issues, not only in southern border towns, but right here in the Buckeye State.
Okay, so you think they're panicking?
Yes, I think they're pissing down their legs.
I didn't add this, but the other thing was former President Clinton and former President Obama. Now, President Obama sounded like a lecture series. of a guy who just couldn't wait to get the hell out of the barbershop or wherever he was talking. It
Yeah,
did not feel the connection you normally get from him, and he's a pretty phenomenal orator, and
he is.
I mean he reads the room better than anybody, and it felt like he was chastising. I don't know. It was just that to me. I was watching it. I watched as much as I could, and he used some slang and stuff that I've never heard him use, because he's always been kind of conscious of that, right? He never wanted to be. I don't know. He wanted to be a certain way. He wanted to be above a lot of, the stereotypes and things like that. At least that's how he operated.
Well, help a brother out, right? She's
Yeah.
not getting the black vote. And so he's out front now. They wheel him out to lecture the black community. Listen, I understand that I'm going to say this and then it's going to be offensive to some people. I'm not black, clearly, but I think
I've
it's
noticed.
offensive when you treat black voters like pawns in an election. Don't
I
wheel out
yeah.
Barack Obama to try to lecture black voters that you need to get on the bandwagon here. So let's look at the campaign. There are fewer black voters supporting Kamala Harris than Joe Biden and Barack Obama. There are fewer Latino voters supporting Kamala Harris than Joe Biden and Barack Obama. And now we know, at least based on what's going on in New York and other places, there are fewer Jewish voters supporting Kamala Harris because of their treacherous policies and endorsement of terrorist organizations. So when you look at the foundation of the Democratic Party, to me, it appears, at least with Kamala Harris standing at the helm, that the foundation is cracking.
Interesting. Okay, I guess we put a pin in that for now, and we watch. I was going to mention things I don't mention is because commentators like to talk about the Sunday shows and how that a lot of pushback there, but our audience isn't watching the Sunday shows. If anything, at 9 o'clock in the morning, they're watching the NFL game in England,
That's right.
and not watching Beat the Press and everything else that's on. The other part of it is I try not to follow media and personalities and interviewers as much anymore
Yeah.
because I go independent. Places like the Ohio Press Network, Racket News. I mean, I think that's where most people who are truly trying to be news consumers have to go. Independent media, a place you can go to that people that actually go to the places they're reporting on and don't just kind of subcontract that out. And I did want to mention that another platform that we have here on Grab Your Gear is Saving the Republic with Joe Staten. It's a program he airs at least 2 to 3 times a week, and I would check that out too. That's a show that Joe's a young guy; he's like 23, and designed his show basically to communicate with younger people again, because when you go to traditional media sites, it's tough to find how this affects me. I think it ties a little bit to what we were talking about the black vote. If you go and talk to black a black father or just someone in his 20s or 30s, I think the thing that they react to when you talk about the election is the economy.
Yep.
It's money. It's my job. What am I doing? And those are the kind of topics I think Joe is also exploring. And he has a guest on. By the way, I just want to plug in Mark Rogers, who does Voice College Football, but also is a kind of an observer of culture and things that we're watching here too. So check that out as well as Grab Your Gear. That's on our network, and you can catch Joe also on TikTok on the Grab Your Gear platform there as well. But I say all that because we're going other places to get news and information. And as I watch some of the stuff we've just talked about, I feel not only is it about the campaign, I feel like certain sectors of the media are desperately clutching to stay relevant.
Yes.
And it makes them go a little crazy because it feels like they need to put everybody else out of business so they can stay relevant.
Hmm.
To me, that's got to be part of the panic too, that nobody's listening to them. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm thinking too much into it.
No, I think you're spot on. I mean, whether you're looking at maybe the largest newspaper in the state of Ohio, who has an editor in chief who refuses to allow pro Trump opinion pieces to be published on the platform, and now almost on a weekly basis is standing at the top of the mountain lecturing down to people. Keep in mind, Ohio is a state that has voted pro Trump by 8 points in two consecutive elections. And here's this guy standing on top of the mountain. And it goes to, I know not a lot of people watch this, but it brings to my mind Martha Raddatz trying to lecture J.D. Vance on Sunday about what's going on in Aurora, Colorado. Are you kidding me? And her justification for being, and she says, no, I know what's going on there. There's only a handful of apartment complexes that have been taken over by Venezuelan gangs. Did you just, I mean, that's what JD said. Did you hear yourself? I mean, these people are so hopped up on their own information that they are now talking down to the general population. And I think it sounds like a gong, and I think it's getting more desperate.
My response to that would have been, Martha, what if just like 2 or 3 units in your building on the Upper West Side of New York were taken over by gangs? Would it, it's only 2 or 3 penthouses, the Upper West Side of New York, no problem.
What if we just call one of the buildings the U.S. Capitol building?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, give me a break.
Guess.
These people are just bass-ackwards, Joe.
When we say these people, too, we're not talking about Democrats, traditional Democrats. We're talking about extreme left-leaning. I want to make sure that's clear.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah. When we talk about truth, I want to stay on that for a minute, because the other thing I've been watching, because my sister went to North Carolina and raised a couple $1,000s and was early in with her church trying to get supplies and stuff like that. So I noticed the area as much as, probably a little bit more than Florida. I saw the Florida thing and all that, but I stayed on North Carolina because I have family in South Carolina. And then of course she went there. And I've noticed, we've talked about this before, because we've talked about this when Matt Taibbi was on this show. It's the whole disinformation thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched a press conference in, it was the briefing. It wasn't a press conference. It was, the Peter Doocy of Fox News asked, Jean-Pierre, the press secretary, a question. And it's basically, it really did strike me. If you don't want to answer a question or you don't have a good answer, it's disinformation. Secretary of Homeland Security also is claiming there's disinformation on relief in North Carolina. The president has accused people of disinformation on what FEMA is doing. And Vice President Harris has also used the word disinformation. I swear, as I watch that, it's like it's really malinformation, true but inconvenient.
That's right.
And that's what it feels like. But they are really playing this, you cannot believe what you see. And the only reason I bring it up is because, again, my sister went and saw it. Mm-hmm. And there wasn't, at least a week ago, a lot of government relief. And most of the relief coming in was from independent people and churches and groups like that. What's going on with the disinformation?
Man, that is such a deep topic that I can get passionate about very quickly. At the end of the day, there are nefarious actors and there are useful idiots, and both of them are together on this. And make no mistake about it, misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, those are labels that the people that are on the progressive radical left use to stick people. Right? They want to marginalize you, castigate you, demonize you. And the best way to do that is to create language around which people can rally. And the problem is, whenever information is inconvenient, to call it disinformation, my understanding is information that is intentionally misleading. Misinformation is, hey, here's a fact. I think it's a fact. Here's information. And then you find out 2 days later, well, that's not really true. Okay, well, I didn't do it on purpose. Malinformation is, well, here's the truth, and it might not be convenient. They don't want any of that. And so when you really step back and look at that, Joe, that should scare the hell out of all Americans. You have Hillary Clinton saying that people should be dealt with accordingly if they're going to spread misinformation or disinformation. You have Tim Walz saying the First Amendment doesn't apply in certain circumstances where misinformation and disinformation is the case. And now you have Kamala Harris saying it. You have members of the press saying it. And I just want to remind everybody, because this is the most recent, how many times were you told 2020, 2021, 2022 that you were spreading misinformation if you said that masks didn't work? You were spreading misinformation if you said that the jab didn't stop you from getting or spreading a virus. That is factual information that people lost their jobs for, that people were demonized for, and now we're going to trust this same gaggle of experts to determine what is information and what is misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. So the nefarious people know what they're doing. They're leveraging the press and and the mob mentality to silence their critics. And then the useful idiots are people who just don't know any better, and they're going to put their thumb on the scale for the bad guys.
There was a tobacco story in the 90s on a show called 60 Minutes, which a lot of our audience never watches. But back when I was growing up, it was a big deal. Even as a kid, that was like where you had the sanctity of journalism. And they did the big tobacco thing with a gentleman named Jeffrey, I think it was Wigman or something. He was a tobacco executive, basically saying that executives knew that tobacco killed people, that nicotine was addictive. They knew what they were doing. And they were basically getting people hooked on tobacco and making billions of dollars. So 60 Minutes did a investigative piece on it, and they got him to agree to do an interview. And it was a producer at the time named Lowell Bergman, who was a pretty famous producer. And legal and, the fact-checking department back then, standards and practices is what they call it at networks, decided to step in and said that they wanted him to cut another version but get rid of the whistleblower. Mike Wallace was there. They basically wanted the story to be altered. What they found out was later that CBS was about to be sold, and it would have potentially affected the story, because it could have triggered a class action lawsuit that would have been millions and millions and millions of dollars. Okay, so I'm just giving you the summary. There was a movie made about it. You can check that out. Tinfoil Ted, what was the name of the movie? The Insider. So great movie. Al Pacino's in it. Christopher Plummer plays Mike Wallace. I bring this up because Lowell Bergman went kind of away after that. And there's a line in the movie, I'm probably paraphrasing, but he says, once you do this, you can never go back. And his point was, once you start to alter news, you're done. And I think that meant 60 Minutes. They have their own issue now with Kamala Harris. I don't want to get into it, but they may have changed some of her answers. Did they match the question? I mean, there's a call for 60 Minutes to release the transcript of the Kamala Harris interview.
Yep.
Because they're thinking of all things, of all places, that 60 Minutes may be on the take too. What the hell's going on? I mean, do you see what's happening here? It's like we're back to independent news, but if I'm just a normal person getting up every morning, I go to work, I'm an electrician or a plumber, or I drywall or I paint, and I'm just trying to get informed. Do you know the challenge it is right now for someone to actually get accurate information? And I kind of trying to put myself back in the voters' shoes and say, I don't know what the hell's going on. I mean, I think it would be hard to just be a person that wants to make a living, put some money away in retirement, and enjoy the fruits of the United States. But sure as hell doesn't feel like that's the trend right now.
Well, let me give you two quick things here, and hopefully a perspective from the inside. First, for years, and I'll say decades, I didn't read a lot of newspapers and I didn't watch TV unless it was a sports contest. Now, some of you are going, well, then how the heck did you get in the news business? Well, I got in the news business because I recognized in 2020 the importance of accurate information. And there weren't people carrying the water for truth. And so that's why we were born. That's why the Ohio Press Network exists. That's why I broadcast the Windsor Report every day from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. because I want people to have a place that they can go to get accurate information. And by the way, I'm not saying that we get everything right all the time, but we ask questions. We speak truth to power. We write stories that people won't write. And it's more important now than ever. But let me just tell you from an insider's perspective, as someone who doesn't care what anyone thinks about me, certainly not my colleagues that consider themselves part of the press, I want to make sure that we're reporting news and information that gives people a pulse on the politics, policies shaping their everyday lives. I can't tell you, Joe, how many times I've been over the target. And when I say over the target, I mean we're looking into something that other outlets aren't looking into, or they've looked into it and they've decided not to report on it. You know, Joe, every time that happens, can you guess what happens to me? I'll give you one guess.
they go after you personally. And if they don't have all of facts together, that doesn't matter. They have to destroy you personally.
Yes. And so you have a combination here. You have people who are, I believe, ideologically captured because they've come up through whatever the education system is. They go to J school, and J school is ideologically captured. And then all of a sudden they have this belief system, this hate and vitriol. And here I am telling a story that they are so hardwired to believe against and hate that literally, if you have somebody who comes out and says, look, this is what's really going on, they come after you. And so you have this really weird environment where people are ideologically captured who are reporting the news to you. And by the way, they're arrogant. They believe they know everything. And the minute that you go against them, they're going to tell you. I mean, look at the polls. Everything is now the college educated are going to vote for Harry Walls, and the low information, uneducated people are going to vote for Trump. I mean, it's just baked into everything that we consume now. If you are on the right, you are ignorant and you're slouching toward Nazism. And if you're on the left, you're like this enlightened being. Never mind the fact that they've gotten almost everything wrong for decades, both intentional outcomes and unintentional outcomes. And that's the part that drives me the craziest, Joe, and I think the people who listen to this podcast are the people who have common sense and are probably in that group of people who say, I believe about 16% of what I see on TV and read in the newspaper, they have common sense. They just don't want to waste their time listening to something that's not accurate. But for whatever reason, the talking heads and the people who are delivering the news don't even think about, like, okay, so this policy is enacted, and where are we going to be as a country 5 years from now? Newsflash: opportunity economies don't work when you are $35 trillion in debt and deficit spending at $2 trillion a year, and inflation is already through the roof. But it's like our brains are broken.
Yeah. Having come from what is called corporate media or mainstream media, I look back and there was a lot of things. I didn't like my news director when I was at NBC. I didn't like him at all. But I look back, he did his best at trying to have balance. That was local news. So, it wasn't a moon launch. I didn't like him mostly because of the way he treated his staff and stuff. But as far as journalism goes, even then, with kind of a person that was kind of a bad person at times, he tried to protect the viewer by saying stuff that sometimes he didn't agree with, and it was like that's kind of how it ran back then. I think what you're talking about now are people that go personal, who come from some of these archaic and aging institutions, and embedded in the media. What else are they going to do? They have to kick and scream and attack to get attention because, I mean, do you think anybody's really picking up a newspaper and putting a quarter in or whatever they cost now, and picking that up? I mean, do you think people are actually watching the evening news and being affected? Maybe some people. I don't think that's what it used to be. So I think what I'm watching when I see you and I see what you go through occasionally with those people is, I feel like, again, they're fighting to protect their institution as much as they are fighting you because they need to stay relevant. I mean, that's what it feels like, which means nobody's reporting on accuracy. They're just trying to make themselves appear important.
That's right. And that's why when we do stories on Springfield and Westerville City Schools and Ohio Issue 1, that people pay attention because they go, oh, I didn't know that. Well, imagine, and I say this all the time, imagine if the press actually did its job, where we would be in this country. It's unbelievable.
Hey, you mentioned Westerville. I did want to ask you about it. Then now we're kind of going to a local story that you covered, local for people in Ohio, that is.
Yeah.
There's a group called Lifewise Academy, which is basically a program to where if students don't have class during the school day, if they have a period off or whatever, they can be picked up, or they can schedule their classroom time around to have a break. They get picked up, they go off campus and basically go to Christian education. Let's call it that. Apprentice Isabella knows more about this than I do, but basically that's it. You're allowed, and I think it is within it's been before at least the Supreme Court. I don't know. Courts have ruled that you have a right to, if you go off campus, to have religious training. I think it's the same for any religion. Muslims, Christians. There are people that leave class early to go learn how to weld too, but that's kind of like within the scope of school, but they can go do something else. And You covered a story in Westerville, Ohio, where the school board basically voted it out, right? It was no longer available. Did I get the story right? What is going on? Because I smell a lawsuit coming against the Board of Education up there.
Yeah, so it is, like you said, Lifewise. It's a Bible-based voluntary instruction program, and it takes place once a week for 1 hour. And Lifewise buses kids away and brings them back during recess or their lunch hours. So they're not taking time away from core instruction. So that's important. I'll talk about that in just a second. But Westerville City School District voted a couple of weeks ago 4-0, with one new board member abstaining, to remove Lifewise. And they cited disruptions, Joe, but could not point to, at least I've asked specifically three times now, what specific disruptions are occurring that made you vote against this. First of all, they won't allow me to speak directly with the board members. They have a communications person who's out in front trying to mitigate the disaster. And there aren't any. So there's no proven compelling point to remove the program, other than, in my mind, I'm going to say this, I'm qualified, it's my opinion, other than religious bigotry. And secondly, the board is standing on this Ohio law because you already said it. The First Amendment protects our religious liberties and our right to free speech. But the Supreme Court has ruled in cases like Tinker versus Des Moines that you have to give equal access to students who are engaged in religious activities and programming as you do students who are engaged in non-religious programs and activities. And so that's why they're citing disruption. But the board is pointing to Ohio revised code law that says schools may allow RTRI, release time for religious instruction. And so the question now is, are parents going to file a lawsuit, or are they going to try to work with state lawmakers to get a bill passed in the lame duck session? The election's 3 weeks away. So between the time the election is over and the end of the year, that lame duck session, there are two bills. There's House Bill 445, Senate Bill 293, I believe, that would change the word may to shall. So schools shall then allow RTRI. That would solve the problem in Westerville, and it would solve it in other places. And this is why that's important, because last night, Worthington, which is another Columbus suburb, their board met behind closed doors. My understanding is their president wants Lifewise out of that school district as well. And so this is now a larger issue. I think you'll see the same thing in Olentangy, and you'll see this happen in other parts of the country. And if I may, I want to make sure that I highlight some of the misinformation, because we've covered this, we're going to continue to cover it, but it's important to understand that in the case of Lifewise, again, this instruction, it takes place during lunch or recess, so there's no interference or disruption during what you would call the core education time. In fact, RTRI rules prohibit that. So here you have an institution like Lifewise who's following the letter of the law, and the district is going, well, because you're doing it this way, it's disruptive. I mean, that to me is asinine and insane. And secondly, they have this straw man argument that it's disruptive, or it will be disruptive, because what if we have 50 religions that are coming to school to pick up, students? That would be so distracting. Okay, first of all, you and I both know that's never going to happen, A. And B, there's this axiom in you go to court and a case has to be what they call ripe for adjudication. That means that an element has to be there that makes the case hearable. And that element is there has to be an infraction. If there's no distraction, if you can't point to a distraction, it's a straw man argument. But that is the kind of thing that these districts around Ohio and other parts of the country will build their cases on to justify their religious bigotry.
See, my wife works in schools. She works at a school. And there's actually a Muslim staff member that they've made accommodations for because she needs to pray at a certain time of day. And they make accommodations. She does it on the school grounds, and I don't think anybody gives a whippity-do. That's her business. So where do you think this goes? I mean, if you have other boards of education pulling this out, hell, would it be great if boards of education worried about getting kids' test scores up and teaching them how to read?
Yeah, wouldn't it be awesome if we actually gave a rip about our kids instead of, worrying about what our sponsors and the teacher unions wanted us to do? I mean, it's ridiculous.
You think that's where it's coming from? Is that where it's coming from?
I think it's coming from religious bigotry at its core, but certainly when you look at All of these groups like Ohio Education Association, a Federation of Teachers, all of these groups, all they do is provide money to what? Political causes. We've talked about this on the Union Hustle. They just cycle money through. And so these groups are there doing the bidding of progressive politicians in schools. It's ridiculous. We should be teaching reading, writing, math, science, history, social studies, the things that are going to get our kids ahead. Because when you look at China and you look at India, they have more A students than we have students. We're getting our asses kicked internationally, and we're worried about RI programming.
Well, Jack, I appreciate you covering that story. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out why it matters, but I mean, to people against it, I just don't get the connection. I mean, that really the hill you want to die on? But we'll find out, and you'll keep following it for us, and let us know about those other school districts. You mentioned there the Union Hustle. That's a documentary you've been working on. I watched episode 3. That was on a pension program. Now, as a member of a union, myself, AFTRA, where I have a pension, I checked on it, and my gosh, we're in trouble too. So there actually is some education in there. If you have a retirement program and you're involved in any kind of pension, especially organized labor, but I'd say any pension based on what I watched with your reporting on that, you would probably want to follow up and check and see the condition of it, because I was astonished at some of the numbers you had in there. I was astonished at the scale of underfunded pensions, the number of critical pensions, the amount of money that's been put in for bailouts. And you look at the economy, you just wonder, is that always, when's that not going to be able to happen again, to when the government's just not going to be able to step in? Because I think that day is closer than people want to admit. You're a former finance guy. I mean, that episode scared the living boozies out of me.
I always talk about it. It's like the python that swallowed the pig when you watch the baby boomers go through the economy. And so when you think about setups like Social Security, it's pay as you go. And there's a significant challenge with keeping that funded. Pensions aren't any different. And the challenge that you have is that you have unions now that are fully engaged in political activism. And it's disgusting numbers when you look at, say, for example, teacher unions. I think they spend 7% of their income on things that matter to workers. The other 93% goes to what? Executive salaries, marketing, and political activism. And then you look at these funds and you go, so here's somebody's hard-earned money that should have been invested, and now they may not get their pension. And so who pays for that, Joe? You do, and I do. I mean, the federal government takes our tax dollars, and they bundle those tax dollars, and they bail out these pension programs. And I'm here to tell you, the number, just the raw number of pensions that are in financial trouble is staggering. And then when you look at the challenge, it's like this. In order for those pensions to perform where they need to perform, they have to get a certain rate of return. And I'm going to tell you something. You're not going to get that certain rate of return over a long period of time without taking significant risk. And therein is the issue. I think some of these pension funds got backed into a corner, and now they're being told, hey, we need a higher return, higher return, higher return. Guess what? The only way you get a higher return is to take greater risk. And when you take greater risk, you also have a chance of losing everything. It is a total goat rodeo. And I'm telling you, you've got to check on your pension if you have one.
There's a part in there that you were working on. I saw a gentleman from the Freedom Foundation. No, it wasn't. It was a government affairs guy and use the word. It is kind of a Ponzi scheme. You're talking somebody. I was working in New York when the Madoff thing hit, and it was, you couldn't go to a restaurant or a diner and not hear people talking about it because so many people were affected by it.
Yep.
It was off the charts, and I remember just the dark feeling and what happened. And that was a Ponzi scheme. And if anything, even remotely, I mean, the pension system would make the Bernie Madoff thing seem like, somebody that got robbed at their, fruit farm compared to the scale and scope of what you're talking about. That was a real eye-opening episode. And of course, you can catch that on the Grab Your Gear YouTube channel, as well as right on your page as well. You can watch the episodes there, I believe, right? You had episode 3 up on yours, right? The Ohio Press Network.com.
We do.
And you can watch that there as well. Episode 4, I think that's the last one coming up. That comes out on Thursday, I guess, at midnight or whatever. And I guess that one focuses on kind of the political action and the backdoor stuff of, kind of that game plan. Looking forward to that as well.
There'll be a surprise in there for a lot of people who kind of are of that mindset that the unions have traditionally controlled the Democratic Party. You're going to be surprised. And I do want to apologize real quick. I know
Yeah.
we've got other stuff to cover, but I have passion about some of these topics. I don't want to be Martha Raddatz. I'm not trying to talk down to people to say, hey, this is what you need to do. I've got the answer. I'm just really passionate about some of the corruption and misdeeds of people, particularly when it relates to people's money who work hard and expect to have a pile of cash there for retirement, and they don't.
Yeah, if you were Martha Raddatz, you would say, Joe, I understand what you're saying, but you're wrong, and we're just going to move on. So
Right.
you haven't done that yet. But Jack, we are going to wrap here today because I know you are actually filling in for another host on your platform, 98.9 FM, where you do the Windsor Report. That is a radio station in Columbus, Ohio. You also have your podcast, which people can catch on all the platforms, the Windsor Report and the Ohio Press Network. You are the hardest working man in media, and also you have a lot of video up on your site now. You've expanded into video, and more stuff coming. I guess you have more. You're going to do more production, I guess, as well. So you're becoming a multimedia platform there, my friend. It's looking good.
Thank you. And I will say 30 seconds. We do have videos coming out on issue 1. And for people in Ohio, issue 1, it would enshrine gerrymandering. It would take the power from the people and give it to bureaucrats. And it's bankrolled by the usual state and federal suspects, even some out-of-country money. So I want to warn people, if you're going to the polls and you're looking at issue 1, I would strongly suggest voting no.
You brought up, you and I were talking, I think last week, issue 1, and it reminded you said, of a program that happened in Colorado. I know we got to wrap it briefly.
Yeah.
Compare and contrast something that we've already seen with this type of program.
Well, so in Colorado, prior to the Obama years, it was red. And through a lot of different things, they made it blue. Part of it was they got a lot of donors involved, and they poisoned the well with the press. And then they did some things with maps. They did some things with amending the Constitution that really turned red Colorado to blue. And I'm here to tell you, we've already seen a radical abortion amendment. We're now seeing this. They say it's anti-gerrymandering. It would actually codify gerrymandering. It's a radical amendment that they're trying to hang to the Constitution. This one matters because if they win with this one, what it allows the progressives to do is to color the maps blue by redistricting your maps for Congress and for the State House in Columbus. So it allows them to get the representation in the State House that they don't currently have. And that's really what keeps them from turning everything blue. But we've seen this before in Colorado. There's a book about it. Let me see if I can pull it up here real quickly. I know we got to go. But it's called The Blueprint. You can see that right there. And, I get that people are busy. If you like to read it. If not, hopefully we'll cover this in the days and weeks ahead. The Blueprint, how the Democrats won Colorado. They're doing the same thing here in Ohio, and it's the same corporate backers. It's Hans-Jörg Wyss, the billionaire Swiss guy who's a foreign national who shouldn't be meddling at all in elections. It's George Soros. It's Bill and Melinda Gates. It is the same usual suspects, and they're here in Ohio, and they're trying to capture Ohio for the progressive cause.
And it's other states are going to go through the same thing, I guess, right? So it has happened in Colorado. I believe Michigan also had the same type of thing. That is issue 1 for the people who are listening to this in Ohio. Jack, you're going to put some videos out on that as well, I guess, so people can get more information there at the Ohio Press Network. Thanks for joining me, my friend. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week back here on Grab Your Gear. And for Apprentice Isabella, I am Joe. Thanks for joining us today. Hopefully you got information you can use, and let us know how we're doing. Feel free to send us an email, any of your comments, questions, or anything that you think we're missing that we may need to cover. Go ahead. Our ears are open. We're not proud. We'll cover anything that is legitimate and at least has your attention. In the meantime, we'll catch you next week back here on Grab Your Gear.